Welcome to The Cusp, a podcast that tries to give you the straight dope on what's actually happening with artificial intelligence, how jobs are changing, and what that means for education and workforce development. I'm Paul Fain, editor of the Job newsletter and co-founder of WorkShift. Thanks for listening. So I'm here with Mike Palmer, who's producing The Cusp. Mike, thanks for joining me. I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about what I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast.
Absolutely, Paul. It's been fun so far. By the time we're recording this, we've already interviewed a handful of your guests, so we know a little better than our listeners what's in store for them. Can you maybe begin by just letting us know what inspired you to pull this show together? What's the raison d'etre for The Cusp?
That's a good question. I think folks have a lot of strong feelings about AI, but finding people who know actual things that can help people make decisions about how to react is not easy. And the goal was to find those folks and ideally to hear about how jobs are actually changing now and what that means for education providers and job training. I have to say, that's been tough. There's a lot of theory out there. There are some projections, many of which in the past have been proven wrong about what's going to happen. So we're going to adjust on the fly. At the very least, I think we found people who are armed with some good information, particularly, frankly, academics who have seen industry numbers and can make some good summaries of what people should be watching, how to prepare at the very least in a really fast changing space.
And there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of conversations about AI that are happening nowadays. What about this show you think makes it different for a listener? What's going to be unique or special about the pod?
Sure. Yeah. So my newsletter, The Job and WorkShift, its sister publication, are independent nonprofit news sources aimed at decision makers in education and workforce development. This will be an extension really of the philosophy we bring there. No agenda. I'm not selling anything. We're just trying to get to people who know things to help make sense of this extremely complex topic. I hope we can do that. We're not always going to hit the mark, but we're going to keep trying. The goal again, though, is to really use what we know now to help people who are trying to make decisions, who are in charge of budgets for community colleges or job training programs, who feel a little lost. I mean, there's just a flood of information about artificial intelligence, and we're going to try to cut through that noise with real actionable intelligence wherever possible.
Yeah, I was struck by how often you and your guests are hip to the hype cycle and are critical, perhaps, about some of the places where there's a little more hype, perhaps, than there is substance. But the bigger thing here is really that there is an underlying substance. There is a new wave that we're on the cusp of. And then to really get to where we need to go, a lot of it is about who you're talking to. So, who are you going to be talking to? Any ideas for our listeners around the types of experts, the types of guests that are going to be part of the conversation?
Yes. And just to build on what you just said, I mean, the one operating premise here is that something big is going to happen. I will say we're coming at it with that belief. I have been convinced in my reporting that artificial intelligence is going to bring some big changes to all of this. And I think we really are seeking to cut that balance, to hit the balance between not hyping things, but also not being too cynical, not trying to reject this in a knee-jerk way, try to see both the opportunities and the pitfalls, all with a real focus on lower income folks. This is not the future of work for white collar workers. I mean, we'll do some of that, but this is really people who are already potentially struggling in the economy and what this means. Could there be more opportunities? Where could their jobs change in ways that might not be good? How could we make a difference as a society and really think through how to help people? And to your question, I'm looking for folks who can speak to that. People in education who are working on projects now related to artificial intelligence, trying to embed AI skills into learning programs, trying to tweak their curricula based on jobs and how there might be changing. People within industry who are really on the front lines of this, who are, companies that already know how jobs are changing. Those are the people we really want to hear from. But then the experts who can make sense of it all. Again, academics do seem to me to be in a great place for that. And some funders too, honestly. Some of the big foundations, they know a lot about what's actually happening, and I think can play a more hands-on role of getting information out to folks.
Amazing stuff. We don't want to get in the way of your conversations with experts. Any final thoughts as we embark on this journey with folks?
Yeah, I'd like this to be a dialogue, not just between me and the guests. I'm going to try to get out of the way and let them do the talking, but with all of you, we need help in understanding what we should be focusing on. Again, I don't need to tell you all. This is a really tough topic. I think people feel very overwhelmed. So, just as I do with my newsletter, I rely on you all on really deciding what to cover and who to feature here. So, be in touch. And I want to thank you, Mike, for helping me work through this challenging but hopefully fun podcast project.
Amazing stuff. All right, let's get on with it, right? I believe your interview with George Siemens follows.
Yes, sir. We're lucky to have George. It should be a fun one. For this debut episode of The Cusp, I spoke with George Siemens, professor of psychology and an expert on digital learning. George has taught at several universities around the world, most recently the University of South Australia, where he led the Center for Change and Complexity in Learning. George is a trusted thinker on technology and learning and was really a pioneer with the massive open online course space, the MOOCs. These days, George is working with Southern New Hampshire University, one of the nation's largest and one of the most forward-thinking universities. He's helping to lead a project on artificial intelligence, which is called Human Systems. And I think we're going to hear more about that in coming months. I had the privilege of listening to George present on AI recently. It was the best summary I've heard. So much to think about with framing that really changed my views. George is a great and generous teacher, and I'm excited to share his thoughts with all of you. Now on to the conversation. George Siemens, thanks for being on The Cusp.
Good to be here. Always enjoy these chats with you.
So I have heard you speak about artificial intelligence, and I have to say I was already taking it seriously, but after that, I was taking it really seriously. And, among other reasons, you're not a hype guy. You're a really trusted voice going way back on ed tech. And I just have to say, if you can summarize, why are you so bullish that this is a top 10 moment in technology for humankind?
Well, I think there's periods in human history where we have this concept of a general purpose technology. And a general purpose technology is something that changes many things. And the reality for AI, I'll speak from two ends. One is just the general social change, and one is specifically from a university perspective. When we started to see how you could use tools like ChatGPT and others that have come on since, it quickly became clear that, this could change how we brainstorm. This could change how we write. This could change how eventually, and we had DALL-E 2 at that time already, but this could change a number of parts of what we do on a given basis. Now, it doesn't have to change everything. I think it's a little bit of a mistake sometimes that it's a light switch perspective, right? It's either completely changing everything or not changing anything. But you can see, even if it changed and reduced 15% of the writing time on pulling a created document together, that's 15% of time that can be allocated to something else. And so starting to see that come on and starting to see how quickly people adopted it and how much it took people back, it really struck me as this is the thing that we have to get on top of. And when I was sending emails to colleagues, I was like, this isn't an important thing. I said, this is the only important thing. And so that was just that feeling of we're dealing with something that we can integrate into our human cognitive system in a way that we haven't been able to fully integrate other technologies. And what I mean by that specifically is most tools that we come across, we'll adopt and it'll make our work better or it'll help us do something we couldn't before. But this was something that could almost integrate within our cognitive ecosystem as a tool that allows it to become an active partner, which means it makes my thinking better. It provokes and accelerates what I'm capable of doing. And that core issue is where I landed on saying, this is a thing that changes everything. And from a university lens, we trade in exactly that domain. We trade in helping people think better, in helping people plan and work and achieve more than they could otherwise. And as soon as I realized that, oh, this changes everything, the next obvious thing was, this actually changes what and how we should be teaching our students. And so I went very quickly from this is a fascinating tool to this is something that we have to make as a priority source of what we build into future learning systems.
So you've signed on with Southern New Hampshire University. You're working on the Human Systems Project. We'll get to that in a second. Obviously, we know that it's going to have a massive impact on the ability to teach and learn, the labor market. We've all seen the figures from Accenture and McKinsey about 30% of working hours changing the next several years. But there are some serious gaps. And, I wonder, when you think about this from a systems change standpoint, what do we not know? And how do we plan when we don't know some of these things?
Oh, that's an entire book. So maybe at this start, I just want to focus on one thing which you started with, which is it's a systems change lens. There was an interesting book I read a couple years ago. I think it came out just around the time of ChatGPT, and it was called Power and Prediction. And they emphasize that there's different ways that general purpose technologies impact society. And one is a point-based solution, which is somebody creates something that solves a problem. In university, in the labor market, it might be, employer matching. It might be tutoring support or something like that. Just a tool that connects or solves a problem and makes some part of our lives easier. Then they had sort of more of a platform middle layer. And then they had this systems layer. And the systems layer is the thing where you say, like I said, this changed everything. And that's where I'm seeing the AI conversation happening. So when you say systems change, I think I particularly want to emphasize that that's the angle that I see. It's not about how do we bring AI into a classroom? How do we bring AI into helping individuals transition into the labor market? I'm really talking about how do we use the capabilities of AI integrated with our human, social, and knowledge system to completely imagine a different model of how we learn and exist in the world. So that's the big vision, and I'm glad you framed it that way. To your question specifically, though, I think what we don't know well is the trusted capabilities of AI. You still hear things, well, it's, hallucination, even though that conversation's diminished. There's questions around reasoning and mathematical reasoning. There's questions around the ability for us to completely trust the tools that we're now starting to see coming into our Microsoft and into our Google workplaces or our Amazon services, depending on what you're doing. I think that's a big open set of questions is this reliable? Do we trust this? And how do we use this in an effective and a meaningful way? That's probably, one of the first ones that we're bumping up against. Another part that's coming up fairly quickly is what are the actual points of integration between human and AI? We did a paper on this, I think in 2022. We specifically looked at human and artificial cognition, and that was actually the title of the paper. But what we were looking at is where do we have that intersection between this is something Paul should do, this is something AI should do, or this is something that this team of people in a corporate setting should do as a human social process, versus this is something that can help accelerate that work from an AI supported perspective. And so that's another key area that we're not clear on at all around how we manage that. And part of it is related to the first point, which is we're not quite clear on what this technology can do consistently over time. It might be able to help you do a really neat project that then you can't 100% duplicate for whatever reason. It may be just how critical the prompting was, some of the degradation of these large models over time. It could be the launch of an entirely new model. Cloud 3 has been getting a ton of attention from the last few weeks. By the time your podcast's out, who knows how many additional tools there will be and so on. So it's that part is what makes it difficult to say, what is it that we need to know and how do we begin to know those things to move forward? So I emphasize in particular, again, my lens is the university perspective, but I emphasize in particular that the best way to get to figure out how we respond is to play with AI every day. I mean, the common mantra with peers and colleagues is find a new tool, see what it does, play with it, get frustrated with it, but embed it into what you're doing, whether it's your writing or your brainstorming, play with neat, cool features, see what's the support mechanism that might have, and think about it over time. Like if this went forward a year or two. So a quick illustration, I'm a little off the path here, but Figure One and OpenAI had their little robot announced this week, or the integration of the two, where it could use the vision capabilities of OpenAI with the robotic and embodied capabilities of Figure One. And Figure One, I think, raised almost 700 million a few weeks ago. And it was fascinating to observe. And you just sit there for a second and you look at, okay, let's play this forward. Let's say, what's it going to look like? And in a few years' time. And I emailed colleagues and I said, you guys are going to have a robot in your home in 5 years if this trend continues. And so it's just this thinking through if this is here, what are the development costs? What's the capability? What's the acceleration and so on? So I think that is a critical systems response to your opening point is we have to get in it, play it, and then sit and think and extrapolate this forward over time. And what does that do to our capabilities as employees or as teachers or faculty in a university or corporate setting?
Well, I really like that because, you know, every question I ask about AI is ridiculous. Like I'm insecure because I'm asking questions, as you say, that are a book, all of them. And I feel overwhelmed a lot by this topic. And I'm sure that's something you encounter in your work. I like the idea of just playing around with it to start thinking differently. As you think about the response from higher education in the United States and more broadly, I feel like we went from, debating cheating in essays and whether or not we should ban it, things that are really missing the forest for the trees. Any thoughts for leaders that feel paralyzed and not really sure where to start?
That's teeing up an internal frustration over the last few years. I've had a fair number of workshops I've led with university leadership around what the AI landscape looks like and how we should begin to prepare for it. So I have more than a few opinions on this. And I think the one part that keeps coming up to me is we have a failure of university leadership that's unfolding right now globally, but particularly in the US context. And that failure is really due to the lethargic and slow response to AI. Now, I get that we're used to being buffeted by every major new technology. Right now, we've got to have a workforce and skills strategy. We've got to have an online learning strategy. We used to need a MOOC strategy. Then we needed a data and learning analytics strategy. I get that leadership is frustrated and university systems are fatigued by this constant cycle of change. But it's negligence to not have a thoughtful response to AI at a systems level. Now, if a university president sat me down and said, okay, we looked at this, and for these and these reasons, we think AI shouldn't be a critical area of focus. I'm like, okay, you've got a reason, you've thought it through, you've had discussions with your senior team, you have a vision for what the university should be in the age of AI, where declarative knowledge is increasingly diminished as a critical value point, not down to zero, but definitely less consequential, and new skills are needed to participate in this emerging economy. Great. You sat that down with your leadership team and worked it through, and you said, you know what? AI isn't a big deal for us. But that's not happening. What we're having instead is an abdication of responsibility. And it's almost like negligence, as I said, to not sit down and have that conversation. So it's defaulting to, well, we'll just, let things ride rather than respond to it. I mean, if you were to look at a university, just capabilities I think a university should have, as of now, I would absolutely expect that they would know at a pretty solid level, how LLMs work, how to tune LLMs, how to use LLMs to solve problems internally within a university, just faculty and staff, access to their own materials, curricular-wise, administrative-wise, and so on. I would expect that they would know how to build the bot that helps students interact with that. I would expect that they would have a range of tools that they'd have embedded in different parts of their curriculum just to test the tires of what this might do, because to your previous question, we don't know what this does yet, and we don't know exactly how it fits into the system of learning at this stage. So I think that's why that's such a critical point. But it's the intentionality of doing something or doing nothing with AI. If you decide AI doesn't matter, make it an intentional decision and communicate your logic to your university or to your stakeholders within that community. The other aspect that comes out of this is if you look at what happened back in early 2000 when we started to see online learning begin to emerge. And we had tools like WebCT at that time and Moodle. And we started to see sort of the growing presence of digital learning. And some universities did it well. Penn State, for example, was big in this space as a traditional university, but some didn't do it well. And we found out who didn't do it well through two stages. One, the number of universities that had to buy OPM expertise because they didn't have that internally. So for the low cost of 40 to 60% of tuition, you got access to a bigger market and you got access to people who understand digital learning. And so universities abdicated a big responsibility or defaulted that to the corporate sector. And so the question I've been asking at these workshops that I was doing with university leadership is, what are you going to buy in 5 years' time in terms of AI expertise that you failed to develop now because you failed to sit down your leadership team and figure out what you needed to do in this landscape? And so I think probably one point I keep coming back to, and I loved your opening framing of this particular question, which is, you don't know and it feels overwhelming. And I think that's exactly the state of mind that leadership needs to get into. Like, get disoriented. This isn't a clean landscape where there's a path that we know how to walk, but become comfortable not knowing, become comfortable kind of being clueless sometimes and asking questions that are blatantly obvious to someone, but maybe not to someone else. And so it's really about stepping into that space from a leadership lens. So just to cash that out, university leadership has a responsibility to their stakeholders to intentionally decide what to do with AI. And sitting there and letting it ride out is what a lot of university leaders did with the digital learning and the online learning movement. And universities that failed to have a strategy paid a certain kind of a price. And I remember meeting with the provost University of Michigan right after the MOOC craze was started. And she very intentionally decided what they were going to do with MOOCs. And they're a fantastic story of a successful transition from MOOCs created capabilities for digital learning, which enabled them to better navigate COVID and so on. So these are skill sets and capabilities at a systems level that are stackable. They move from one success to the next. So figure out LLMs today. That'll help you figure out whatever comes next in AI. Get off to the side and let this wave of AI go by you. And then suddenly you have to buy the expertise that you were responsible for you to develop as an institution.
Well, I love that. And I definitely will be looking for the college or university that says, we've decided this is not something we need to move on. I mean, that would be something I would respect that, frankly. But, you mentioned Michigan. They've already done some custom tool work, I believe, with OpenAI. They're smart about this. They have resources. How worried are you about institutions that don't have what Michigan has getting left behind, particularly around opportunities for students? I mean, students are obviously trying to use these tools. We see that all the time. But if you're at a community college, you may be at a disadvantage, I would think, to be exposed to what you need. I mean, how concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned because quite often community colleges are those that serve the populations that most need opportunity and most need access. And so that skill deficiency is an important one. And one of the ways to, I think, address that challenge is for organizations to begin to pull together shared networks or relationships where they distribute capability development. So we will, at the ASU GSV event, share a bit about a data consortium model, which we want to coordinate with ACE. And basically, the intention there is for universities to get into the AI arena by sharing data, sharing expertise, collaboratively building models, building institutional capabilities to do interesting things with AI. And not just, oh, look, we have a ChatGPT enterprise option available for our staff where you can use ChatGPT to do this, or you might be able to have a certain amount of credits on Azure or AWS credits to work with any of the other models, or using, Google's infrastructure as well. You're using their model gardens to play with different kinds of AI technologies and so on. It's not that's a part of it. It's really to say, how do we meaningfully become not just consumers, but producers of the outputs of AI in education? There's a big power shift that seems to be happening. And Fei Li, she leads the Stanford Human Artificial Intelligence group. And she's, iconic, like, the grandmother of our current flavor of AI, if that's not the right way to frame it. But she started off with ImageNet and has had a massive impact on the AI landscape, and for period led critical AI projects at Google as well. And she said in a podcast recently that she didn't feel that the university sector would have been capable of producing something like ChatGPT. Now, it wasn't just capabilities, it was also, computational access and so on. And then she followed up in that same interview. Then she said, when ChatGPT dropped, she felt that, wow, like this is transformative for the universities. Universities should be all over this as a mechanism for changing learning and experimentation and so on. And then, of course, what disappointed that didn't quite happen. So with community colleges and state level universities and private, well-funded, wealthy universities, the question really becomes, a central one. And I think it's one that all of them have to answer, and none of them need to be excluded from the solution if they're thoughtful about it. But the question that they specifically need to answer is, how do we get into the AI arena as producers and contributors, not only as consumers? Because right now, almost end to end, they're all primarily consumers. And so the argument I've been making, and you're trying to do with the data consortium and other initiatives, is to say, collaborate, share your resources. You may not at your community college have a developed data science team, but maybe you have a data scientist that's trying to work with a bot or an dialogic kind of a tool set that's built on, let's say, Llama 2. And you kind of know what you're doing, but you don't quite. You have some critical questions. So you access a network of peer experts. And so collaboratively with a distributed network of people in community colleges that each have these bits and pieces of knowledge about, maybe connected to a few state level universities, you are collectively sharing data with one another, and you are collectively solving problems by participating in this landscape. And then when somebody comes knocking and says, I have a fantastic bot I want you to buy, you can actually say, oh, well, let's talk through what it is, how it does, how is it different from the one that we built, and so on. So it's about creating a cultural and institutional capability to be conversant in the AI landscape. Now, I know that sounds a little trite, but for colleges that don't have access to University of Michigan level resources, the only way they're going to get meaningfully into the conversation is to connect and collaborate with other college systems and with university partners in order to get into that conversation. So you walk into the AI arena collaboratively and with a network of peers, rather than wait and sit outside the arena, if you will, and hear the stories of what others are doing.
Well, that definitely gets at the need for systems, associations. I mean, community college systems or state higher education systems to play a role here in helping to disseminate knowledge and expertise. And just to put a pin in what you shared there about Southern New Hampshire's human systems, this collaborative global data consortium, it is global, correct? It stretches beyond
Yeah,
the United States.
yes, even though, as you're likely aware, many of the organizations that are contributing to funding, and we'll get clear on that at the GSV event, the
Sure.
ASU GSV event, but many of them are focused on sort of the US education system. But we have universities from, Latin America, from UK, from Africa, from Singapore that are interested parties in engaging and contributing to this. But for the purposes within US sector, I mean, that's our primary focus as that's its origin, but we'll certainly have data from different regions and different parts of the world. So we're treating it as you engage in capability development by sharing, making your institutional data available to a trusted network of peers that have no commercial interest necessarily in using that data for anything other than increasing institutional capability and increasing student success support.
Gotcha. Well, I, like many people, will be tuning in San Diego this spring to hear what y'all are dropping there. I think about the different buckets of what higher education needs to be doing right now. There's the efficiencies in the way they run, the way they create content, coursework. There's, of course, the students' tools, the chat bots, and other ways that AI can help students. But there's also preparing for what's after college, the impacts on the labor market. you know, I'm struggling, frankly, to find specifics there. The management consultant companies are doing lots of public facing studies about how much jobs are going to change, but it feels like a lot of heavy on theory out there, not as much kind of actionable intelligence as one would hope if you're trying to adjust a curriculum for what is probably a fast changing profession. And we know there's quite a few of those. Is that consistent with what you're seeing? I mean, are colleges flying blind when it comes to some of these jobs that are going to change pretty soon?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the way you're framing it, some of the artificial boundaries that we've created in learning, such as you're learning to get a degree and then you're in the workforce and you're reskilling in the workforce. And some of those artificial boundaries maybe aren't quite as relevant as they perhaps once were. And so let's just think on this for a second. What might this look like? Well, let's say you start with your local state college or your state level university, and you get started with your degree program while you're there. And what the university should do, I would argue, and some would definitely disagree with this because they certainly view that not all university work should necessarily be directly reflective of labor market, and I understand that and I appreciate that logic. But for most students, that's not quite the case. They're there to prepare to get to the next stage of their life. So you start at the university. And one of the things the university does is it continually tracks and understands what are the trends in the labor market. And your curriculum should be updated to reflect near real time changes in the labor market. And this really hit home a number of years ago. Kaggle did a survey and they found that data science at that point, one of the hottest domains out there, fastest growing areas of work. 59% of people working in data science learned data science skills through MOOCs or through just self-study or through learning on their own. That's crazy. Like this is the hottest trend, one of the biggest areas of employment. And now most universities now will have their series of master's courses in data science and so on. But it was just that market mismatch. Now, universities need to stop thinking like they have an exclusive position in society because it's dwindling in some ways. And maybe it'll come back to where we were, say, 100 and some years ago, where a small percentage of people go to university to get a degree because they have a research orientation or have some, academic perspective. And a big majority of individuals just find pathways into the labor market. We already see with Google Skills and with various consulting firms changing their entrance requirements and so on to get started within the company to not necessarily need a degree to get going. State level degree drops being made at a number of organizations, and certainly the rise of things like competency based education, other outcomes. So let's just say for a moment that we expect that the future model of learning is going to need to be much more multifaceted and provide many more opportunities for learners to partake in different ways. So if that's the case, you start with your degree at the university and they're continually tracking labor market trends and your curriculum is updated on a weekly basis, not planned 6 months in advance, 8 years in advance, however long it is. It took me at the University of Texas 4 years to develop a master's of science in learning analytics. By the time we had the courses set and we were ready to go, yes, you can tweak and update and bring in relevant trends into that course, but that's a pretty lengthy development process. So I would expect the university would have a solid profile of who I am as a learner, what my knowledge and capabilities are, what I actually know, the skills that I have. The curriculum would be constantly mined and mapped by what's going on in the labor market. If you're taking a computer science degree, what are the current skills that you should be having? And what we're teaching should reflect that in a pretty short window, not even in a semester level lag. We're talking a week's level lag. If you see what's happening specifically with AI right now, how fast it's developing and how quick new technologies are adopted. Look at the work that Andrew Ng is doing with deep learning. At one point, somebody starts talking, RAG is a good way to augment the capabilities of an LLM. Great. Within a week or two, he's got a RAG course on how to work with LLMs. And all of a sudden, there's a new technology, LangChain. Oh, great. Now he's got a course on that. And, just last week, he announced more of a graph RAG model to look at graph-based data structures. So what I'm saying is his capability to move that fast is what universities have to emulate so that they continue to stay relevant and introduce students to that. So a student now gets into the labor market. They have experience as a learner, go into the workforce. They constantly skill and reskill. Well, the university has a persistent profile of what they know and what they don't know. And so they keep coming back to the mothership, if you will, to update, to reskill, and to keep building those capabilities. So the reason I'm flagging that as a pathway to get to long way around to get to your question, the reason I don't think we've seen significant movement on this and more of its buzz is because it's that systems level flip that has to happen. Universities don't do a good job of tracking labor market trends. They don't do a good job of building a persistent profile of the learner across multiple courses. They don't track an individual into the labor market and give them guidance and support on additional learning opportunities based on their area of interest. So in all of those areas, you need someone to sit down to have a vision. It needs to be at the dean, provost, or likely president level in a university that says, we want to do something different here, right? We want to support our learners, not just in technical knowledge, but in the human skills that they need to be successful and to flourish in this AI age. And that requires re-architecting that pipeline of university to labor market, asking questions on, should everybody get a university degree? How do we accelerate the inclusion of labor market trends into our curriculum today? How do we ensure that we serve our students 5 years out by addressing their profile and their ongoing learning needs and so on? So the reason we haven't seen that happen is the senior leadership hasn't engaged meaningfully in the process and systems impacts of AI and of this churning marketplace where skills are increasingly valued over formal degrees.
I like how you compare this moment to other big moments in recent ed tech and higher ed history, I think about that in the way people kind of frame this, okay, this fits into this box in my understanding of the world. I really don't know that artificial intelligence does work that way. And the way, to be specific, I had a K-12 district ask me to speak to them. And one of the teachers said, I remember we got the iPad. People said it was going to change everything. Now we have to yank it away from our students. And there was a bit of the like, this wasn't like a knee jerk sort of AI is bad. It was more, can I just wait this out? Is this, will this pass and we can just not do anything? Do you encounter that sort of skepticism? I'm guessing you do. And if you do, like, what do you say to someone? I know this kind of gets at the first question I asked, but like, who just says, I've seen this movie before. It's more hype than reality.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question to sort of move toward a wrap up. But I think here's where the conversation gets complex for me. I was early on in the social media conversation. We used to call it Web 2.0 at the time. And I was amazed that I could, sitting in my little office in Winnipeg, Manitoba, writing about how we can now have two-way interactions through the web. I could collaboratively build an idea with a colleague that was in South Africa, with a colleague that was in India, with a colleague that was in Kentucky, with a colleague that was in Mexico, or I could be part of this sort of frenetic, high energy, collaborative knowledge building network while sitting in, not exactly the hub of international commerce, if you will. What we didn't realize at the time is that, this sword cuts two ways. And now we're seeing the effects of that with social media now in our election process, in the politicization sort of society in general, and the propaganda capabilities of international governments in these open networks, even as you and I are talking, the TikTok bans that are gaining some interest and momentum. We are realizing that every new capability has a corresponding effect that can be intentionally misused by individuals who perhaps have less than ideal goals and motivations. That, I think, is why I think it's so important that we are intentionally selective about our adoption of AI. So to the first part, I would just say that's why we need to make sure that what happened with Web 2.0 and social media, as the increasingly negative effects of phone use and constant manipulation psychologically from apps and attention getting and so on, we need to make sure that we are not letting the AI conversation unfold in the same laissez-faire, lackadaisical kind of way. We need to be much more active in the ethics and the impact and the social details of it than we've previously been. That's just a responsibility to be thoughtfully engaged in AI. But specifically to what you're asking, the AI is a thing that changes other things. It's not something that you can just plug in. Like an iPad conceptually could have changed teaching and learning if we had brought them in at large scale. And I know some universities early on tried to do that with the iPhone and with mobile phones. But I think the big difference here is all the tools we've used so far, they don't have a degree of quasi agency. I mean, we can think with AI in a not quite a peer-based level yet, but certainly in an agentic level, in that I'm relying increasingly on meeting summaries from hours and hours of meetings a day as to look at my week. I get a YouTube video. I was playing with Gemini 1.5. And so you get a YouTube video, 3-4 hour videos, or 2, 3, 500 page documents, and you can drop it in and say, okay, what does this document say about this? That's a capability that changes what I teach students in terms of reading and summarization and even note-taking habits and so on. So I think that's the part that when people say, well, it's just like the iPad, or it's just like, we heard before about MOOCs. And I would say, well, no, what's different here is this gets at the core of who we are as humans. This starts to play in our cognitive domain in a way that actually forces us to change how we think and how we work. And not just that, what we actually teach in our universities and how that's taught. For example, there's an article many years ago, and we've been talking about this internally a lot, but I think it's called Super Complexity. And Barnett talked about some of these ideas as well. And it represents a shift of moving from epistemology to ontology, right? What a student knows to who a student is. And I think our curriculum has to start to reflect the building of those human skills, right? Reconnecting to nature, reconnecting to one another socially with these a lot of technologies that have provided a disconnection mechanism. And I think that's where the question starts to become relevant. If AI can do a lot of these cognitive activities better than we can. And they've now deprecated it, but it was basically an AI progress index. And they showed where domain after domain, cognitive domain, if you will, and task after task, AI outperforms humans. That means we need to turn our attention to developing who we are, sort of our beingness, if you will, at a meaningful level. So that would be my response to someone that says, well, it's just another tool and just another technology. And I'd say, no, actually, this is something that enters into our cognitive ecosystem and becomes an agentic, embodied, distributed type of intelligence that doesn't just impact how we do on a few basic activities around us. It changes how we think, and it changes how we learn, and it changes how we teach.
That's really great. I've just got to say, I love the thoughtfulness and the nuance you bring to these issues. And I'm glad you're going to be at the forefront of helping us make sense of this for the next couple of years. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Thanks very much, Paul. Great to connect.
Thanks for tuning into The Cusp. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. You can visit us at thecusp.ai. The launch of this podcast was made possible by the collective philanthropic support of the Walmart Foundation, GitLab Foundation, Cognizant, and the Kapor Center. Thanks to our supporters and to you all for listening. Catch you next time.